Okay, everybody, welcome back. Hope you had a great break. We're going to go to Madison Gates, the NRCS Madison.
Hi, let me share my screen.
We're going to set up a screen share for your presentation, and you can take it away.
Okay. So I'm Madison Gates. I'm a soil con with the NRCS Team 4 based out of Grangeville. We cover Idaho County. I'm going to talk about some of the resources we may be able to come up with to put some ideas into action. So to start off with, for anybody that's not familiar with the NRCS, I'd like to give a little background on who we are and what we do. Our mission statement is ensuring productive lands in harmony with a healthy environment. In 1935, the Soil Conservation Service was created by Congress during the Dust Bowl to implement soil saving practices. In 1995, the name was changed to the Natural Resource Conservation Service to encompass the expanding duties of the agency. So back to our mission statement, ensuring productive lands in harmony with a healthy environment. I kind of want to break that down for everybody, just to kind of let you know like what the agency is all about. So ensuring productive lands means implementing best management practices on productive lands that not only produce ag products, but do it well in a healthy environment, which is a functioning system that provides ecosystem services. And doing it in harmony with each other. It's a positive feedback loop. It's a systems approach that benefits the individual and the community. And the resources we use to implement this vision statement, we partner with local universities. We employ soil scientists, geologists, plant scientists, ecologists across the nation. Next slide. So what it's like to work with the NRCS, all of our programs are 100% voluntary. We are not an enforcement agency. We do not come knocking on your door telling you you're doing something wrong and you need to fix it. You come to us and we help you with your goals. It's really customer driven. Your conservation plans belong to the customer. They belong to whoever contacts us for assistance. You know the history of your land, you know when the creek out back stops running, you know when things flood, and we're just here to help you achieve your goals and solve resource problems that you want resolved. We also do technical advice, so we can come out and do a site visit and give you ideas, solve problems, and then you can take it or leave it. So our conservation plans involve a 5-step process of initial planning, an application. We go through an eligibility process and then ranking. So our conservation plans are they're contracts and they are a competitive process. So once you go through ranking, if you are approved, a contract is offered and then you implement your practices. After your practices are implemented to standards and specifications that are set beforehand, financial assistance is provided. And we always have resources available online, which is, we have a nationwide and we also have like a state specific. So like local specific resources. Next slide. So one of the conservation plans I wanted to talk to you guys about tonight is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program. We also call it EQIP. The basis is to solve an identified resource concern or improve management, and financial assistance is completed for completing conservation practices. The eligibility requirements for land type is no minimum acres. We do pasture, crop, forest, range, farmstead, and also wildlife. You don't necessarily have to be an agricultural producer. Applicants can be individuals or entities. There is a $900,000 annual income cap for assistance. So some available practices that I thought could be helpful to some of these projects pertaining to the Little Salmon watershed are riparian buffers, prescribed grazing, stream habitat improvement, irrigation water management, upland wildlife habitat, tree and shrub planting, fish and wildlife cover crops. I can't remember where I left off. We have like fish structure. We have all sorts of, we have tons of practices. This is just a very short list. Next slide. So some highlights is we have EQIP has variable length contracts from 1 to 5 years, depending on how big your project is and how long it's realistically going to take you to implement those practices. We're not, I know that Team 4 especially is very focused on not allowing anybody to do more than they can feasibly handle, because then we just run into problems. We're not gonna, once the contract is signed, we give you standards and specifications. We're not just going to disappear. We're gonna give you technical assistance, answer any questions you have throughout the process. Payment rates are fixed at the beginning of the contract, and once practices are completed, then payment is provided. Applications don't guarantee a contract. Next slide. So in summary, there's no penalty for program applications. There's no application fee. When we're giving you technical advice, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, but I believe we can create a conservation plan for you that you don't even, we can create a plan for you that you never have to take into contract. You can follow it, implement it however you want. And since we aren't an enforcement agency, we don't know what's going on your land without you coming to us. Give us a call, email us, invite us out to your place. Having a conversation never hurt, and you don't have to take our help if you don't like what we say. And when you do call us, have some set goals and objectives so that we can have a really productive conversation. This is our local contact info for Idaho County Team 4, and then also the Adams County Team 5. So we have quite a bit of staff in Team 4, and now we got some really great people. So I think we can do some awesome stuff. Any questions? Next slide.
So then you run the NRCS projects for this area then?
In Idaho County.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, so half the watershed, of course, is in Idaho County. We can work across county boundaries, but our funding is actually split at that county line. So if we were going to assist somebody in this county, we would have to work with the local team here to tap into their funding sources. That's just where our state has decided to make a decision on, group funding and stuff.
Because the office that I've talked to is in Weiser.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be Adams County then also.
So
right?
and that's just out of Team 5.
Okay.
So that's Valley, Adams, and Washington County, I believe. All
Okay.
three of those counties are in their own team. And again, they have their own funding, but the programs, Gem County as well. Okay. The EQIP program exists across all the teams in Idaho.
Yeah.
They just have different local priorities they may have. They may have different amounts of funding that the teams get based on historical need and historical applications. But all the programs we offer are offered across the state.
Yeah, because I know down in the Treasure Valley, they're more focused on the Boise Snake River drainages than they are focused on these drainages up here and the more highly erodible soil.
Mm-hmm.
So what class is this soil up here for erodibility?
Most of it's pretty darn low, to be honest, because we have such a high clay content in the area. I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume that the Meadows Valley is slightly more highly erodible than like the Grangeville, Camas Prairie area. I think you get into a little bit more sand soil down south here, but it's still pretty darn low.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot more money available for the highly erodible ground, like we have on the Boise drainage. And they're more excited about doing projects down there than they would be in this type of an area.
And I would argue that
Is the way that's the way I understand it.
I would argue that that's probably more just historical, or kind of what it's become, what it's evolved into. There is some legal requirements regarding highly erodible lands and how that has to be managed if you want to be eligible for our programs. So there is definitely some emphasis on highly erodible lands. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's no money or nothing else available. It would just take somebody saying, I want to do that, some other kind of project, and, you know, getting that focus shifted a little bit. A lot of money goes to highly erodible lands too, because it's very visible, right? It's what people see, it's what people think of when they think of soil erosion, is erosion from crop fields and that kind of stuff. So there's definitely more money available than just highly erodible lands.
Well, Jerry, is there much competition between applications for projects?
Yeah, there is. And different administrations, different farm bills change our funding. And so it kind of changes all the time. But in the 10 years I've been around, there's only been a year or two where there's been no competition. More often than not, we fund about 30 to 40% of the applications that we receive. And that's not, I should that's not every application we receive. Every application we receive goes through our eligibility and kind of base criteria process. A lot of projects, they may be good ideas, but they're just not enough. There's not enough interest in it. It's not well defined yet. So we'll push that off till the next year. But the ones that we actually get through ranking, we fund about 30 to 40%. Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of competition, and good or bad, maybe it's not going down any. Competition always seems to be going up. We're always seeming to get more and more people interested in our programs. That doesn't always go hand in hand with more money for our programs.
But that's good, get more done.
It is good. Yeah. Yeah, we never turn back money. Our state gets, you know, our allocation. We never turn back money. There's always projects.
I was gonna ask you, for the equip, does that, that funding, does it also, let's say the riparian buffer is an example, does that include just money for the rancher or farmer to implement that project, or does that also include staff helping, like, let's say you're doing a planting or a fencing or whatever you're doing with that buffer? Is it, you know, up to them, or is it more?
So each practice we have a flat rate that we pay out at. So regardless of whether you're taking willow cuttings from your land and, you know, potting them over the winter, and then you're going to use them, or if you have to employ people to do that, we pay the same flat rate. Does that make sense?
It does, but you don't have staff that helps. It's more up to that person to find the
Yes.
staff to do it. Okay.
Yeah.
What, I've got a question again. What makes, or how many equip applications have there been in Adams County? What's that? Or
I can't tell you Adams County. In Idaho County this last year, I'm going to say we were probably in the neighborhood of 50 applications. I would assume Adams County is somewhere around there too.
and then what makes an application work outcompete others?
So each team has a local working group which is a group of individuals. Anyone in this room could be on that local working group. But every fall, that local work group gets together and says, what kind of projects do we want to see, right? What projects do we want to prioritize? And so they'll set, you know, for instance, our team up north in relation to wildlife, they said, you know, what are we doing for wildlife? Are we removing livestock from a stream? Are we protecting a fuel storage area? Are we creating habitat, something like that? And the local work group gets together and says, this is the type of project we want to see. This is what we're going to provide ranking criteria for. So it's all locally controlled as to what makes a good project. And that changes every year. Sometimes it changes a little bit. Sometimes you'll get people who want a certain type of project done, and they'll get in with our local work group and they'll say, I want cropland practices, you know, to minimize soil erosion. And that's where a lot of money goes to. So it's really just user driven as to how that money gets spent.
Okay. Is anybody in here on the local working group?
I just think that Julie Burkhart, I believe, is.
Well, she's for conservation.
I would
she
assume-
works a lot probably with NRCS.
And I would assume she's been invited at least to the Team 5 local work group or knows something about it.
She's not.
I'd be very surprised if she doesn't know anything about it.
Oh, yeah.
But again, just like our programs, it's a voluntary thing. We invite people every year. We try and, you know, send that invite out to people and say, you have a stake and you want to have a say in how that money gets spent. You know, you gotta show up at the table, but that doesn't mean anybody has to show up. And like I said, it varies every year, which groups you tend to see more of.
This is Wendy Green with Adams Conservation District, and we have been involved with the local working group for several years. And anybody in Meadows Valley who wants to participate, let me know, and I'll make sure that when they start planning the next meeting that you get invited. The last several years, it's been primarily folks from the Weiser area. It's been hard to get people from Adams County, especially north of Council, to drive down to Weiser for those meetings.
So Jared, what kind of programs are you doing like that would encompass this little salmon, like from the head of the canyon on down to Riggins? Are there programs going on that way?
Well, from the head of the canyon down to Riggins, overall, there's very little private land in that stretch, right? But if somebody wanted to do riparian habitat, if there was an area of the river that was, you know, causing excessive erosion or something like that, we'd be happy to look at anything like that. Habitat improvement stuff, grazing management near there. I wrote down a quick list based on what some of the other presenters have said tonight. So Julie talked about photo monitoring. Through one of our programs, we actually can pay for that to be done because we know it's record keeping. It's gonna cause a change in management, right, of how you do that. But if you're willing to do some of that photo monitoring, we actually have a program where we can pay you a flat rate to go out and get that done for a few years to help learn how to do it and how to interpret the data from it. The next one that Bob Skinner talked about was irrigation water. And his falls perfectly in line with a lot of what Team 5 already does based on irrigation, and that's just improving efficiency, right? Moving from a flood to a hand line system or a hand line to a pivot system, right? All in the name of water savings. And then we talked about stock water, right? If you have areas of land that you can't get water to or that you routinely haul water to, or if you have a stream and you say, I want to fence off that stream to protect the water quality, but I need water in that pasture, well, we can either help develop a spring if you have it. We can even drill wells if that's what's needed, right? If we can say we're having an environmental impact by removing them from this stream, this surface water, we can help drill a well if that's what's needed.
It's my understanding that in Meadows Valley, we are not considered highly erodible ground. So I don't believe that NRCS would ever fund sprinklers or cost share on sprinklers in this area.
They sure could. Whether you're highly erodible or not, doesn't necessarily have the impact of saying you're qualified or not. Yeah, that wouldn't make any difference.
Well, I applied for a pivot in Jordan Valley
Mhm.
and I was denied because it's not highly erodible ground.
And
And we applied for a pivot in Parma and it was gonna be 100% funded because of the erodibility of the ground.
And that was likely driven because of the local working groups. You gotta remember, we're only given so much money.
Yeah,
The local people get together, and if that's what they decided, if they said, we only want to fund projects on highly erodible ground, that's where it's gonna go. But that alone programmatically is not excluding anybody. We could do it on highly erodible or not, it doesn't make any difference. It's really more up to that local body that has decided what they want to rank.
I think that's what the local body decided,
Mhm.
I understand.
And that's where you have the opportunity to get to that local working group meeting and say, hey, we want to see some of these changes made. So how do we get that done? What do we need to put into that local work group to get some money specifically for that?
Just out of curiosity, Sandy, has the driving ranch utilized things like this for some of
Yes.
your repairing, fencing and whatnot?
Yes, we have been involved in a couple of equipment programs. For riparian.
Good.
Good?
I think Sandy's question was too, if you guys worked with or funded any projects south in Idaho County from say Riggins to Smoky Boulder.
Yes,
That, I mean, you have, that's because she asked if you'd done
yeah,
projects along the Little Salmon.
yeah, we
And
have
what were
done
they?
projects. Some of the biggest ones and most visible is after the flood of '96. There was a lot of stream restoration
Yeah.
that happened, especially in the Pollock area. Can't give out too much details.
No, but I mean, you have,
There-
it
there
was after
has.
the flood.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and more
there was a lot.
recently, we have done some riparian, some pretty small scale stuff, but some riparian stuff. And a little bit of grazing management on some ranches and stuff south of that, on the Little Salmon watershed for sure. Like I said, a lot of it's just, it's either tied up in big ranches. That area seems to either be big ranches or tiny little 20-acre properties or 40-acre properties. There's not a lot in the middle of that that's private lands.
Does the working group, like, do they publish like what their criteria are at a given time? Like how, as an applicant, how would I know
Yeah,
if
so
I'm on
we,
the right track?
so we put it out in the paper.
Okay, cool.
When the local working group is, that everyone's invited, it's a public meeting, anyone can show up to it. So we do publish all that, but I would say if you want to make sure you get invited to either the team 4 or the team 5, either get with your conservation district or send me an email or something. Just get with us directly and we'll just make sure you get on that list and are notified. We're always looking for ways to make it more inclusive. Like I said, whoever shows up to the table tends to make decisions for that year. And so we've seen it shift from, people in forestry relations, they'll show up and that's where our money will go that year. The next year it's cropland type practices. Kind of follows whoever comes to that table that day.
Jared, you mentioned a couple of times that, of course, the program is based on the limited funds that you're awarded. Do you see increased opportunity over the next few years because, or, well, I guess the better question is, are you getting any additional funds from the infrastructure bill?
We don't know yet.
Okay,
I figured that question was gonna come up because that's a pretty hot topic right now. We don't know yet. Our agency as a whole, I believe, is expecting to get some amount of money for that. But we're really at the stage with that infrastructure spending where agency heads are dealing with those funds right now. How that's gonna trickle down to a local field office or even the state of Idaho for that matter is really widely unknown. I will say though, that overall, our funding is quite good. we're better than we have been in recent years. So we're still operating on the 2018 Farm Bill, which is the most recent farm bill that was passed. There should be a new one in 22, 23. And then there's lag time, lawmaking and everything. And that's if the government's active and does what they're supposed to, but that's here nor there. We operate off the Farm Bill. That's the bulk of our funding. But yeah, we have lots of money available. It just has to fit that local priority.
Should we schedule one of our meetings for the night of the working group meeting in Adams?
Sure
We can all
could.
show up.
I think have Ron come up from Weezer, because ours is out of Weezer.
Yeah.
We're zone 5.
So there will be a Zoom option. There has been, at least for the last 2 years, for all of these work group meetings. And we're planning on Zoom continuing forever at this point. As much as I hate to say that, it is. So, and it is good because you can join from anywhere.
Do you ever have, do people ever, like neighbors ever work together on a project, or is it all like, does that weight carry anything?
Yes and no. We often have like groups of people, especially when we're dealing with riparian areas, it tends to go hand in hand, where we'll have, 3 or 4 landowners in a row who all kind of want to see similar changes, get together and do it. It does make a difference in the ranking, because we can just say, look, we're having a better bang for our buck, right? We're getting a bigger area taken care of. But we also have other programs. So Madison only talked about one program. We have about 5 different programs available to do a lot of the same stuff. And one of those is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, where we would actually work with the local conservation district to write a proposal to set aside funds in advance, right? So EQIP is based off state funding that we get every year. But through RCPP, the conservation district could go to the NRCS and say, we want $500,000 to do irrigation in the Meadows Valley. Then that, if they're approved, that $500,000 would be here. So your competition would go down drastically, because you're no longer competing with people in Weezer or Emmett or wherever. You could write a program and say, that's what we want to see here. We want this much money for it. And whoever writes that program could develop their own ranking criteria as far as what project is going to get funded out of that. I have 2 of those active right now, one in the Camas Prairie and one in the Lehigh Prairie. Overall, I think we got just shy of $1 million between the 2 projects.
Is that a 50% cost sharing, or?
It's not a cost share. It's not a percentage. Everything we do, like Madison said, is flat rate. So every practice has a payment rate associated with it, and that's determined at the time of signing those contracts. But a great example is fence. We pay $1.20, I think it is, per linear foot of fence, like a typical 4-wire barbed wire fence. We pay $1.20. Costs you $1.10, you make 10 cents. If it costs you $1.50, you pay the difference. Right? We don't like to deal with receipts and bills. It just gets really, really murky. Our payment rates typically cover about 75% of the projected costs. I will say in the last 2 years, some of that has been thrown entirely out because of material costs. I know irrigation stuff has gone way through the roof. Any kind of metal, fence post, pipes, anything like that, it's gone way up. But yeah, usually it's about 75%. But again, it's important. It's just a flat rate.
I have some notes here from the November 2020 local working group meeting down in Weezer. That was the year we changed from ranking based on resource concerns, per the suggestion of Ron Brooks, the Team 5 leader. He suggested it would be easier for NRCS to rank applications if the local working group used land use for rankings instead. So here were the rankings that our group came up with for EQIP categories: irrigated cropland, irrigated pasture, rangeland, forest land, high tunnel systems, and wildlife stream bank protection. And those priorities only apply to EQIP funding. You've got to remember that there are a whole lot of other types of NRCS programs and different fund pools to address other issues. But this gets to that question you were talking about, the debate you're having about whether there can be money available for highly erodible land. In this group, we chose to address land uses instead of, our old ranking was water quality, soil erosion, degradation of plants, soil quality, and insufficient water. So that would have been the 2019 ranking. 2020 was irrigated cropland, irrigated pasture, rangeland, forest land, high tunnel systems, and wildlife stream bank protection. Sorry, I can't find my notes right now from last fall's local working group meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. That's very informative.
So you guys provide funding or help fund for wildlife fencing, in a sense? I mean, I know.
Well, not exclusion fence. So I just want to make that clear. We don't, like Fish and Game, as through their depredation programs, well, they'll build you a 12-foot fence so that deer and elk can't get to things. We don't do anything like that. But if you're talking about building fence that's friendly to wildlife or like a lay down type fence, yeah, absolutely, we can do that.
Yeah, I was looking at like something that they could cross without tearing up
Mhm.
themselves and wire and everything else in the
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, and we have some pretty good specifications. So like Madison said, even if you don't want our money, right? I mean, and like I said, it's competitive funding. It takes at least a year to get in place. I mean, there's hoops to jump through with funding. But even if you don't want our funding, we can give you the specs on how, to build a wildlife friendly fence or what we think is a good way to do that. And like Madison said, take it or leave it. It's just a piece of paper. If you want to use it, that's great. If not, we're just happy we could help in some way.
Do you charge for any of those services to come out and consult or make a plan?
No, that's a great thing to point out. All of our services are 100% free. We will never charge you anything, just for our services to come out. Yeah, and again, if you apply for our program and you don't get funded, you can apply again next year. If you apply for a program and you get funded and you're really happy with that, say it's a 3-year contract, and year 2, you're ready to move on to the next great project, you can apply again and have multiple contracts at once. There's no restrictions on any of that. And I should say too, if you apply and then 2 days later decide, this isn't going to work, or I don't want to deal with you or whatever, withdraw your application. There's no penalty for that either. We like to think we're decently easy to work with.
So up until a contract is signed, then everything is.
Yeah,
open.
exactly. That day that you put pen to paper, that's when you've committed to completing what's in that contract. Everything prior to that, you can walk away at any point. And we do. We have people all the time who we get right to that end stage, and then finances change, life happens, whatever it is, and they just say, I can't do it this year. Okay, that's fine. We'll take everything, put it on the shelf. If you come back next year, and we'll change a few dates and try again, or change the plan, or whatever that might be.
Years ago, there used to be a group out of council that was the Agricultural Stabilization and Conservation Service. And it was ran out of council. I was on the board for that for years, prior to what Dean and Sandy are on. What agency is that? Did you come in and take the place of that?
No, that is now the Farm Service Agency.
Okay,
We work in conjunction with them. They manage a lot of the record keeping for farms, crop reporting, cropland type stuff. But yeah, that became the Farm Service Agency.
Okay.
That also changed in 1996.
because see, they used to drain swamps and do water tanks and repairing stuff. Did you work with them back when, Sandy, or was that prior to you guys?
I can't remember working with the Farm Service Agency. So I don't know.
Yeah.
And the history on that is originally through Congress, the ASCS was the
Right.
one who had the programs.
Right,
They're the ones who had the
ASCS,
money.
right.
And the NRCS or the SCS at the time
Mhm.
was purely the technical arm. We didn't administer the money. We just did the technical work for them to administer the money. And in the late 80s, early 90s, that started to shift. And then in 1996, when the names changed and really reorganized what roles everyone played, that's when that really changed.
And that's when the ASCS went away.
No, it's still present.
It's still down
It's
there.
now the Farm Service Agency.
Who's Farm Service Ag Council?
Who?
Yeah, do you know?
I don't think there is one on the council.
It's in Weezer. It's housed in the Forest Service building in Weezer along with NRCS. And I think Kim Royer is still the manager in that office.
It's down in
Kim
Weezer
Royer.
now.
And I can pull you all those names if you want to know who's where. Or boys,
Oh,
we
okay.
can give you the directory.
Connect down there, but Wendy's got a handle on it down there. She would know who's.
Jared, is aside from the NRCS and then, the soil water conservation districts, like I'm trying to imagine like a chart in my head of like supportive funding partners or opportunities. And I feel like the state's got some money. Like, is there like a picture of that? I need like an infographic. Like, can we like build something? So it's like, I need like what is it, the after school cartoon, like here's how you find the money. But would that be something that we could build, like, put together, like, to kind of track it down? Because I've learned a lot, I saw your first presentation on the field trip, and I've learned like 3 times that between you and Madison now, and so I just feel like there's a lot of knowledge out there, like, how do we build a field guide?
Yeah, and
The user guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention the governor's office of species conservation.
Yeah,
There's a lot, I don't even know what I'm talking about, so yeah.
There's so much out there. One of the hurdles that I would see is that every different agency, whether it's state, federal, whatever that may be, oftentimes programs come and go and monies come and go.
Okay.
And then oftentimes the restrictions on those monies make it such that it wouldn't necessarily be something a landowner could apply for directly. They may have to go through another partner agency or something. But I think to make a simple kind of roadmap of everything that exists, I think it could be done. And I really think the conservation district might be a great source to be like the head of that, because that would be a resource that they could certainly use when people are going to them and asking for what funding is available or how do I get this project done. I think that would be a great house for that. And oftentimes the local conservation districts often know much more about the funding, because of course they're typically not the funding agency, but they're the nexus for all sorts of different operations going on. So that's probably who I would enlist to do that. And Wendy might be able to speak on behalf of the conservation districts down here, but if we wanted that in Idaho County, we could make that happen.
I'm taking notes.
Sorry
I
for
feel
volunteering.
I'm building.
got 5 minutes left. Any more questions? We do have 5 minutes left. Wendy, would you be willing or available for a follow-up conversation along these lines, like given some time to prepare?
Define conversation, Gary.
Well, just like maybe an elaboration on like what funding resources might be available. Like if the steering committee meets, and people talk, that'd be something useful for the folks to have.
Sure.
And you can help define like what that is. I'm just be willing to put some time into it. Cool. Any more questions?
I do want to say, Thank you to Madison. Madison's new. She's been with the agency for 3 months, almost 2 months.
2 months.
And I asked her if she wanted to present on this. I didn't assign her. I said, do you want to? And she said, absolutely, I do. So I want to say thank you to Madison for doing that presentation. It's tough to gather all that info when you've been on the job for 2 months.
Very good job.
Yeah.